The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show, where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. You know, we do this all over the United States. I love doing Houston because I spent a lot of my life in Houston. I know the Houston area. And you get attached, I guess is the best word, to some of your experts because they're so good, they're so heartfelt. And our expert today is one of my favorite, which you rarely hear me say. And I'm so glad that we have her. And I don't know, the subject we're going to be talking about today is not the happiest subject in the world, but this is about planning for the future. And I know that they just had some tornadoes in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where people were killed this week. They weren't expecting that. And that's why today's show, I think, is so important. Our expert today, she is the managing attorney at the Dean Law Firm located in Sugar Land, Texas. She owns the Dean Law Firm, and she limits her practice mostly to estate planning, elder law, wills, probate. And in fact, when we do talk about probate, she's always talking about how she can save you money. What attorney ever does that? Miss Jean, I'm going to have to call her my friend Julia, has practiced law for over 30 years, opening her own law firm 16 years ago to provide a different kind of legal experience. And it's because she really does care. Let me welcome you to attorney Julia Dean.
Hi, good afternoon, Steve. It's so good to be here. Thank you.
I got to tell you, I love doing your show.
Thank you.
It actually goes by so fast, and I'm always left with questions. Before we get started, we're going to start doing something different next month. We are going to take your questions, and we will read those over the air, and Julia will answer those. Most people, what they want to do is they text me, and my text is 954-336-3767. 954-336-3767. Plus, it'll be all over social media this week. And we will start answering your questions. Julia, you know, I can sit here and talk about your firm, but you do it so much better than I can. Tell people about your background, how you got started.
Well, I've been practicing over 30 years, but the last 16 or so of that has been really concentrated in estate planning. So I started out in commercial litigation and civil appellate law, and really had a chance to see the different issues that came up. But my heart really was for helping people proactively. And so when I went out on my own, I just felt like I wanted something that I felt was my sweet spot, where I could be helping people and proactively preventing the problems that I saw, spending time and money and emotional expense in litigation, which I felt like didn't need to happen in a lot of these circumstances. So I'm just so grateful to be in a place where I can just spend time with people, find out their hopes and their dreams, and be able to take that and put it together as a wonderful estate plan that will hopefully prevent all those problems that we'll be talking about, some of those today, on just what happens when you don't plan. So thank you for.
Julia, why do you think that people just don't plan? And there is so much to plan.
Well, it's hard to face our own mortality sometimes, or even our disability. As we think about powers of attorney or living trust or other things, we're planning for our disability and our passing. But it's really a gift that we can give our loved ones, and it'll provide us too with just wonderful peace of mind when it's done. I know when I'm kind of in the middle of things and I think, oh, I really wanted to make an update to my plan, I don't have peace, until I do, because, if something happened to me or I was about to go into surgery, I want to make sure that that's okay. And I know it's a difficult topic, but it's a really important one. And kind of human nature too. We all think we're going to have more time.
Yes.
And we don't always. And we don't know when that will be. And so, why risk leaving our loved ones in a really sometimes a devastating situation if we don't pre-plan? And so I think it's important to know what might happen if we don't plan and what will happen sometimes, because the state of Texas is really great about letting us know what will happen, if we don't plan. And I think
I always
that, haven't we?
I always think about the entertainer Prince.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guy who had all kind of management around him, a lot of money.
Right.
Didn't even have a will.
He didn't.
And he left it pretty dirty when he left. He left it to the lawyers.
Right.
And it didn't have to be that way.
No. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be to provide for your spouse, your children, your loved ones. And, it should be done in a way that doesn't harm families. I think we've all experienced it, sometimes either where we don't have a plan or, we, in the sense that we know someone or someone in our family didn't plan. And then a relationship deteriorates too between family members. And what I found is, there's usually someone who's what I would call the rock of that family. And no one even recognizes who that is sometimes until after they pass away. And now with that rock gone, everyone's arguing and sides may even be drawn and emotions are raw. And sometimes they don't talk to each other for a long time, sometimes the rest of their life. And that's, not what we want for our loved ones, for sure. And it's a terrible consequence of not planning.
Yeah, Julia, I know a lot of people that whether there's a spouse, a loved one passed away, that's when the real fighting started. And I kind of think of you as a referee, though it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah,
but
I really am.
If planning is not done properly, you leave it. And I even saw where a lot of them were upset who kind of took charge, overseeing the whole thing.
Yes. And someone's got to, and they make the best decision they can. That doesn't mean they don't love the other children or the other, family members. It's just that they, need to pick someone that can oversee all of that. And, they don't want to leave a mess. And so just understanding too, that whoever gets that role, it's a big role. It's a lot of responsibility. And to be able to support someone through that role is really important.
How should someone decide who oversees the legalities? Besides, I don't know, is that you or is that a family member?
So the person who decides that will be you, because you're the one. If you're doing a will or an estate plan, you get to decide that. But if you haven't planned, then the court decides. And usually that's the people who are willing to get in there and fight. And, we don't want our family members to be fighting. And so it's always best if we can pre-plan and we can decide who that person is and take care of it right away.
Are you normally the power of attorney, or is that usually decided by a loved one?
No. So usually that's decided by a loved one. Usually we're not functioning in that role at all. We're just setting up all the documents and paperwork so that you have someone in place. We oftentimes will assist them if they want us to, and we come along and either we are representing the executor who's probating the will, or the administrator who needs to take care of a estate that doesn't have a will.
I don't want to scare people, but I do, because this is so important. What happens if there hasn't been any planning done? There's no wills, there's no estate plan. What happens?
That's an age-old question. If I don't do anything, will everything be okay? And if it won't be okay, what happens? And so really what happens is really what you don't want from most people. I think most of us think the state of Texas would do what we would do. And I would give it to my husband, and then I would give it to my children and down my descendant line. But that is not always what happens. And so what happens is the state of Texas comes in and writes the laws and decides who your heirs are, the people who will receive your assets. And I think for a lot of people, it's a pretty scary thought of who might be doing that. So just an example, I think one of the hardest examples is a blended family situation. So, if we're married and not all the kids are our own kids and we pass away, well, it's going down to our kids. It's not going to our spouse for just about everything. If it's community property, our spouse keeps their 1/2 share of the community property, but our half isn't going at all to our spouse. It's going to our children. So, depending on the relationship there, the stepkids may not be too happy about giving up their half share and probably won't. And now what does your spouse do? Your spouse has half the equity in the house. What if they need to sell the house and go into nursing home care? Well, they have the right to live in the house. Texas does at least give you that. They give you one thing. You can live in the house the rest of your life. But what if you need to move? What if you need to go into assisted living? All of those things will require us then to sell the house and get just 1/2 of the equity. Well, will that allow for your spouse to be taken care of the rest of their life? Maybe not. I don't know about you, but my husband and I are planning for retirement, both based on everything we've acquired 100%, not 1/2. And so can you imagine the devastation for a spouse who now learns not only does their spouse not have a will, so it's going to cost more and it's going to take more effort going through the probate, but now they're in a position where they've lost half the assets. As you can imagine, and we've had that situation way too much, it's devastating for the spouse, and they're mad and they're upset at their spouse. And, it's like the last thing we want to do is leave such a bad taste in our mouth to our spouse when we could have prevented that.
I picture a person having a checklist of what they want to get done. And then there's the real checklist, the one that's in your head. And your checklist is so much longer because what people need. People don't think about all the different things that they need. And because I guess I'm thinking about these people who try to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. You should never do that. Never. And, we hope that with this show that you will contact Attorney Julia Dean's office and set up an appointment and go over things with us. Because, as I start off the show, Julia, those poor people down in the Dallas area where the tornado hit and some of them were killed, they didn't know that. That was the last thing on their mind. No. And I think people put this off to the side thinking it's never going to happen to them, but that's just not true, is it?
No, it's not true. And If we don't do anything, we're in a really bad situation. If we try to do something on our own, and oftentimes we think we have it taken care of, and we have that false sense of peace, because I would say most of what I receive, when people do online wills, we're having to throw them out. So it's like we have no will at all. And again, that's a very expensive process, and it's going to someone that we don't even know. You don't even know who it's going to, probably. And so it's probably going to someone you don't want it to go to. And so it's what you don't think about too when you're doing your own plan,
Right.
even if it does stay valid, that may cause additional issues in court, that we haven't planned the way we really should for our loved ones who need maybe additional planning, or maybe we need tax planning or asset protection or other things in place. Maybe we have a special needs individual like we talked about last time. And so we do need to pre-plan all this. And even if we think our situation is pretty straightforward, usually there's a lot of things that you're not thinking about. And when people leave my office, it's like, wow, I didn't even think about those things. And that's because that's what we should be thinking about for you and helping you get to that place where we're having a very comprehensive estate plan for you.
I want to go over this just one more time to make sure everybody understands. So if I don't have a will, who's going to get the assets if it's not my spouse and my children?
Yeah. So we think it'll go spouse first and then our children. So really there's two parts of this equation, of who gets your assets if you have no will. So first the court's going to look at the laws that say, okay, what kind of property do you have? Do you have community property? Well, if you have community property, that's considered one half your spouse and one half yours. And if you have separate property, it's considered yours. And separate property is anything we own prior to marriage that we keep separate and we don't commingle, which is a different story. And then things we receive in inheritance, again, if we don't commingle it. And there's a few other exceptions. But primarily what we acquire during marriage is and will be community property. So any growth on separate property, if we haven't done something special with it, it is community property. And so usually we see people commingling it, and it really is all community property. And then we have to look, okay, is it separate or is it community? And then is it real property or is it personal property? And then once we determine all that matrix, then we have to look at overlaying that matrix. Are you married? Are you single? If you're married, whose children are they? Are they all yours? Or is it a blended family situation? And if it's separate property, it's dealt with differently than community property. If it's real property, it's dealt with separately than personal property. If it's someone who's married, it's dealt with different than someone who's single. And if the children are all yours and your spouse, then it's treated differently than if there's a blended family situation. So let me just give an example in the married scenario. And we have kind of this matrix. So if we have separate property, then the real property really belongs to your children and your descendants, except the spouse gets a 1/3 life estate, which is a weird kind of thing. But basically, they have a life estate.
Yeah.
I don't know why they do the third. Anyway, the personal property is 1/3 to your spouse and 2/3 to your children. Now, if it's community property, it's different. So if all the children are your children and your spouse's children, then it all goes to your spouse, like we'd expect. Real property and personal property. But if all the children are not yours and your spouse's, none of it goes to your spouse. All goes to your children and their descendants. And the only thing your spouse gets is a life estate in the home that they're living in at the time that you pass away. Again, recall what we just talked about. That could go away if they need to sell it. They need to move. They need to get into assisted living, anything like that. So we need to really be careful that we plan, because for most people who have blended families, they are appalled by that kind of scenario in their life.
Julia, do you get clients that come to you that they were not happy with the will, how things were distributed,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to fight the will?
Yeah.
Can they do that?
They can. Usually our wills always have a no contest clause. And we do usually a
Okay.
very extensive one. So if someone contests the will, they will lose everything. And so when
Oh,
they see that, then it's like, well, maybe I won't
that's a real
contest it.
gamble, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is a deterrent. And so we're really grateful that we can put in something like that into our trust and our wills. And so usually we don't see it in that circumstance, but if the will or trust does not have that in that, yes, people will contest it, and that could go on years, and it depletes the estate. Sometimes it's more than the estate itself. Involved in one where, yeah, the attorney's fees are more than the estate is, and yet they're
Oh
still
my God.
fighting. It's just crazy. So,
Oh
those are
my
the kind of
gosh.
things that happen when emotions get, taken, you're just getting taken away by your emotions. And people are not rational sometimes about some things, even personal property, things that have no value can take on a life of its own. And so that's why just dealing with everything is so important.
Boy, you have to wear a lot of different hats, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I do, I guess a lot of de facto counseling, in many ways. But I think that's important. I really do.
So who comes into your office to sit down with you? Is it just the husband, or is it the husband and wife, or is it both and say the kids are older? Who comes in to meet with you?
Usually it's both spouses. We like to have the spouses together so that we can really, it's an educational time, especially on the first consultation, where we go into the different options and what are the pros and cons of each. But also, we want to tailor it to their situation together. But occasionally we do get times where one spouse wants to do their own plan and something different than the other, and they don't want to have the same attorney, and that's fine. Then we'll just represent one. But I would say the vast majority of the time, probably 95% of the time, we're doing both spouses and representing both of them on a common plan. And even if they're doing slightly something different, they're together on the same page and wanting their whole plan to work, including their business assets and everything else. We want it to flow the way that they would want it to in their estate.
What do you advise people to bring with them when they come see you the first time?
Mm-hmm. Well, when they come to see me, I will ask them to fill out a questionnaire before they come. That will give me an overview of their entire, what I really need to know about their situation, whether it's their family or their financial situation. Estimates on that are fine, but I need to know, do I need to do some tax planning? Are there certain kinds of assets, like retirement assets, for example, or life insurance or other types of assets that I might do some different planning with? And so knowing that I have those as pieces of the plan may allow me to have different options on asset protection or tax planning that I might not have with some of the other assets. And then I want to take that all into consideration. And when I sit down with them, then I, just find out their desires for their own legacy and their questions, their concerns. And then we can pull that together. Once I know what kind of plan they want to do, like if we're doing trust planning, then there'll be follow-ups to, just talk about, okay, bring in the financial statements so we can help you with getting those assets inside of trust. And so we do as much as we can, which is different than a lot of attorneys. Usually they'll just give you the instructions and say, go do it yourself. And I found that people were coming to me with trust from other attorneys, and there could have been a great trust, but it didn't have anything in it, except maybe the house.
That's scary.
And then it's not doing what we want it to do. And so I just started helping my clients fund trust. That's just part of what I do. Feel like it's so important. And I know why other attorneys don't do it. It just takes a lot of time and effort and hand-holding. But I think that's important. Let's not wait until after someone passes away and then we have more of a mess, when we could have made it so much easier on our loved ones by taking care of it now. And so we just take care of it now, and we help you with that.
We just got an interesting question from someone who's listening on the radio.
Okay.
What a great show. Thank you for bringing her expertise to us. what is the difference between an estate planning attorney and a wealth management company?
Good question. So, an estate planning attorney is going to be the person who's preparing the legal documents. They're going to be looking at all those financial assets too. So, that's what I do. I look at all of that. I figure out legally what's the best plan, and I prepare that plan. The financial advisor, like the wealth management companies, usually are financial advisors. A lot of them are fiduciaries too, where they're putting your interest above their own, as opposed to just advisors that don't. So it's important to know the difference. But they are the ones helping you decide what kind of investments that you want and where you should put things. And maybe you need to add a piece of life insurance. Now, I a lot of times will work with the financial advisor. I like to work with both the financial advisor and the CPA, especially when we have a tax plan situation, because I feel like it's kind of a three-legged stool. If you've got one piece that's not there and getting advice from the one, your plan could fall, and we don't want that to happen. So even though I know a lot of tax laws and planning, it's always good to have the CPA, who that is their specialty, giving advice in all of this too, and the financial advisor, who is really focused on the assets and the investments. They help us. We work with them on getting the funding into the trust. So if we're doing a living trust, for example, we would be reaching out to them and getting the forms they need, that we need to fill out, and we'll be working with them on that and explaining to them what we're doing, so they're on the same page and they know how to help you manage that after we've set it up, and we'll continue to help you as well too on that.
How often should somebody come in and have you look at their will?
So anytime there's a major change in your family situation or financial situation, that's a good time to come in. Otherwise, I'd say every 2 to 3 years, it's good to just take it out, look at it. When we prepare a plan, we prepare a summary of the trust, and we prepare what we call confirmation of names and fiduciaries. So that would be your family information or your beneficiary information. And then the people that you've appointed in the different roles, for like your financial agent or your trustee or your medical agent. And so that's a good shorthand way of just saying, okay, who did I name? And then the summary will say, what did I do with my estate in my trust or will? And then together, okay, is that what I want to have happen? And so it's a good overview. And we have a continuing client maintenance program. We like to meet with you every year, update you if things are happening in the law, something's happening in your family, give you advice on that, but also update your funding. So we update we put everything on an Excel spreadsheet, and we just kind of track it. So we make sure that everything is inside that trust and that it is operating for you. And we follow up with you. Okay, have you bought anything else? Have you changed assets? Have you closed an account and opened a new one? Do you have rental properties now? Maybe we need to get those protected in an LLC. So it's always good to have a regular check-in.
How about if you've remarried, something like that as well? Absolutely.
If you're remarried, if you have different children, grandchildren, a lot of people then want to bring in a trust for the grandchildren that they hadn't done before, or great-grandchildren. So there's a lot of special times to come in.
Well, Julia, the bad thing about your show, it just never seems like it lasts long enough. We've come to the end of the show. What a great show today. And if you'd like to hear today's show again, all you do is go to iHeart, put in Ask the Experts Houston, and you'll see estate planning there. Same thing with YouTube. You can rewatch the show again. Julia, give your phone number out to everybody.
Well, thank you. I would love to help anyone who is interested in estate planning or probate, guardianship, or elder law. And my number is 281-277-3326. And if I can give my
tell you what,
website,
you should write that number.
Yes.
People should write that number down and keep it. And what is your website?
That is JuliaDeanLaw.com. So JuliaDeanLaw.com. So you can go
Julia.
to contact us there and contact us, and we'll call you back.
And they will. Thank you so much, Julia. And Julia will
My
be back
pleasure.
with us the last Thursday, I believe it is, of Thursday.
Last Friday.
Of this month. Too many shows, Julia.
No.
And we'll be discussing more. Get your questions in, and we'll be more than happy to read them out on air.
I would love to do
Again,
that.
thanks,
'Cause I want to
Julia.
talk to what you're interested in too. So that would be wonderful. Thank you.
We'll have a blessed weekend. We'll
You
see you
too.
soon.
Thank you.
She's like one of my favorite attorneys. She's been with us for several years. Attorney Julia Dean. I trust her. I mean, there is no doubt. We're out of Florida, but I would have her handle all my planning. That's how good she is. And just write that number down again. That ends today's show, but we'll be back with you again next Friday with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Experts show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.